right, good morning. All right, one more time, folks. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Great day here in Houston. We needed the rain. Here it is, and here we are. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Brano. I'm the Vice President for Advancement University Relations. It is a true privilege to welcome you all today to have an opportunity to work, and I have the opportunity of working alongside with the President to put on these amazing events that we do every year, and we're always pleased with the event. So again, thank you so much for being here. As many of you all know, the President's Lecture Series is a signature initiative that brings our campus and surrounding communities together to explore ideas and engage in thoughtful dialogue around some of the most pressing issues of our time. At UHD, we take great pride in being a place where diverse perspectives are valued and where open conversation is not only encouraged but celebrated. This platform also allows us to connect with industry leaders, policy experts, and change makers, all with the goal of better preparing ourselves and our students to navigate and lead in an ever-evolving world. Today's program will include a featured lecture, a conversation between Dr. Owens and our moderator, Professor Natasha Paggio, whom I'll introduce shortly, and a Q&A session and an opportunity for those interested to stay afterwards and participate in a hands-on sewing workshop. More information will come on that. This workshop invites our audience members to contribute to the creation of Dr. Owens' largest artwork to date, an 80-foot size portrait of a fin whale, so don't miss out. Before we continue our program, I typically take this moment to introduce our president, but however, in the spirit of today's theme and in recognition of our shared responsibility to care for our planet, not just during Earth Month, but every day, I'd like to first invite Adriana Penabald-Galva. She is the Sustainability Coordinator for the Center for Urban Ag and Sustainability here at UHD to share a few important details about today's lunch and sustainable materials and what we're supposed to do. So, Adriana.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Adriana Penabad. I am the Sustainability Coordinator for the Center for Urban Ag and Sustainability. Today, we will be showing some environmental leadership through waste reduction and circularity. So we will be offering zero waste options, and we'll be having our dedicated sorting waste station just right outside. We'll be sorting our waste stream into recyclables, compostable items, and landfill. So we're hoping to divert at least 90% of our waste stream today away from the landfill. This is part of our program that we have with the Center for Urban Ag and Sustainability, our recycling program, in which we meet once a week and we recycle everything on campus, and along with data tracking. So we will weigh everything today so that we can get that 90% diversion from the landfill. And thank you so much for allowing me to collaborate in this way.
Thank you, Adriana. And now it's my great honor to introduce our President of the University of Houston Downtown, Dr. Lauren J. Blanchard.
Thank you so much. And before I introduce and welcome our speaker, I certainly want to take the opportunity to thank the College of Science and Technology for hosting us here today. This is always a beautiful space. It not only is a beautiful space, it feels right in here, especially with the great topic that we have before us. I also just want to quickly say, and taking a point of privilege here, that I feel firsthand that although our speaker is going to be speaking about some of the waste that we see in our oceans, that we don't have to look very far. I know it's not a fair comparison to have a bayou versus an ocean, but we've got our own hardships with our own bayou right in front of us, right? So I want to make sure that you're applying some of what you're hearing today to the real life challenges that we've got right here at UHD with respect to certainly the plasticware that we know that finds its way into our bayou and becomes the responsibility of parties to make sure that we are using those for the good. So with all of that stated, I have the privilege of introducing now Dr. Katharine Owens. Dr. Owens is a National Geographic Explorer. She is also a Fulbright Nehru Fellow and professor and chair of the Department of Politics, Economics, and International Studies at the University of Hartford. Dr. Owens holds a PhD in governance and sustainability from the University of the Netherlands and from the College of Charleston, where she earned an MS in environmental studies, as well as a Bachelor of Arts degree in studio art and biology and a BS in anthropology. An interdisciplinary scholar, she merges science, policy, and the arts on the topic of plastic pollution, and has dedicated more than 20 years of her life to researching water policy, marine life, and the impact of plastics in oceans. Through Entangled and Ingested, which is a multi-year interdisciplinary project, Dr. Owens has partnered with groups such as the Harvard Museum of Natural History, Middletown Commission of the Arts, the Connecticut Office of the Arts, and the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk to construct more than 50 life-sized collages of animals harmed by plastic pollution. Her art is displayed at the Bradley International Airport, the Connecticut Science Center, the Middletown Parks and Recreation Complex, the University of Hartford, and the Free Center, making the impact of ocean pollution accessible to the general public. As stated in our UHD News, Dr. Owens' work is a powerful blend of science, conservation, and creativity. Needless to say, we are most honored to have Dr. Owens here with us today. As always, for those of you who need to be reminded of this, our President's Lecture Series aims to bring thought-provoking content from informed guests whose work sparks both conversation and inquiry. In recognition of Earth Month, Dr. Owens will deliver on that promise with us today with an eye-opening exploration of the staggering impact of plastic waste on marine life. We will hear firsthand accounts from her research on beach litter, and we will see her artistic transformation of unrecyclable plastics into life-size art pieces portraying animal life, ocean animals, excuse me. So today's Earth Month celebration offers a one-of-a-kind collaborative opportunity, as well as we heard just a few minutes ago from Mr. Zambrano. After the lecture, Dr. Owens will lead a hands-on workshop in which members of our UHD community will contribute to her latest and largest creation, an 80-foot fin whale. As the fin whale is one of the hundreds of animals harmed by plastic, this project allows the UHD community to join Dr. Owens in communicating this project join Dr. Owens and communicate the challenges to marine life and considering our own shared responsibility right here at home to take care of our oceans and bayous and the creatures that call those oceans and bayous their home. So please join me now in officially welcoming and giving her a true Gator welcome to Dr. Owens for joining us today. Thank you so much.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you having me here today. I'm thrilled to get to come to Houston. The weather's beautiful to me. I left cold Connecticut, and so I'm thrilled no matter the rain. So I'm going to talk to you about my work, and I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. The president already shared a little bit about me. I'm going to do this so I can see my slides. Is that okay? Is that messing you guys up in the back? We're good? Okay, thank you so much. So yes, my first college degree was in studio art. And then I did undergraduate degrees in biology and anthropology, and then a master's in environmental studies and a PhD in governance and sustainability. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I think this interdisciplinary background is really what defines my work. And my work in the past 30 years has been about water and water policy. And more recently, it's focused on single-use plastics. This is a graph that shows us production globally of plastics from the 1950s to 2023. So in the 1950s, we were producing about 5 million tons of plastic per year, and now it's upwards of 400 million tons each year. And when you look at the documentation that's available on the web for people like me to find very easily, the plastics industry makes clear that they want this number to go up every year. They're not trying to reduce. Their stated goal is to increase this number. And of course, we think, and you all are doing really wonderful work here around recycling. But what we know is that 95% of plastic packaging globally is not recycled, and 90.5% of all plastic ever made has never been recycled. And that's because it's not designed to be recycled. So some of it is gathered, and at best, it might be downcycled. But the true recycling, this water bottle is going to become another water bottle, is not reality. And don't get me wrong, I recognize that plastics are an important part of modern life. I don't think you'd be able to get through a day without touching plastic. Furniture in this room and in many rooms around the world is primarily made of plastic. Our cars are plastic. Our clothes are plastic. Our phones definitely have some plastic in them. But the thing that makes plastic so useful, right, can also make it a problem in the environment. So I'm going to talk about some of the reasons it does become a problem in the environment. First, plastics don't break down very quickly. And in fact, we don't know how long it will take many plastics to break down because it depends both on the type, right? If it's thick or thin, if it's pliable or sturdy, and then also the conditions in which it is found. So something that's at the bottom of the ocean is going to break down much more slowly than something that's on a riverbed or a shoreline, and it's being exposed to oxygen and sunlight, maybe wave and wind action. I have a good friend who also is a plastic pollution researcher, and she likes to say if Shakespeare had worn disposable diapers, those diapers would still be on the planet today, which is gross, right? But what that tells us, right, is that all of the disposable diapers that have ever been used are still around, unless they've been incinerated, which is gross in a different way, right? So the next couple of slides include images of animals that have been harmed by plastic. So if that's not something you want to see, please be aware that that's going to happen for the next few slides. So the problems that plastic cause, I focus on how it affects wildlife. And this is an image by the artist Christopher Jordan of the Laysan albatross. And this is a bird, a very big bird. It has like a 7-foot wide wingspan. And it nests on the Midway Islands in the Pacific, which is relatively near one of these areas, the gyres, where because of currents, plastic or other debris accumulates. So what happens is the adult birds set up their nest, they go off to look for food for their young, they bring it back, but unfortunately what they're finding is not necessarily food, it's plastic, as you can see here. I've seen a documentary by the BBC called Message in the Waves, where they show this nesting ground, and it's just littered with the dead bodies of these albatross. So what happens is that plastic fills their stomach, so there's not enough room for them to take in the calories that they need to grow and thrive and eventually fledge. And so unfortunately, many of them don't reach that stage. The other issue for wildlife is that of entanglement. And this is a photo that was shared by Helen Masters of the Phillips Island Nature Parks in Victoria, Australia. It's of an Australian fur seal. And this is a clinic where they bring in animals that are harmed in different ways and try to help them. And she said when this animal came in, they first thought it had been hit by the propeller of a boat because of this gash on its neck. But then as they were working with it, they found that actually what was at the bottom of that wound was this piece of twine. And I can't tell if it's strapping from a package or maybe a cord from a balloon, but because of the ruler, I can see that it's not very large. It looks relatively lightweight, and yet it caused injuries in this animal that it did not survive. They taxidermied the results to use it as a teaching tool. So what we know about the different species that are harmed by plastic pollution first comes from a book chapter written by a researcher named David Laced. And in 1997, he just pulled together all the records from the literature about different animals that were affected by entanglement, ingestion, or both. And his book chapter is really essentially just a very long table where he lists all these different animals in the records. So someone was studying sharks or turtles or seabirds, and they noted here and there, oh, we found one, wrapped up in plastic or had ingested plastic, and he just brought all that together. So in 1997, over 20 years ago, we already knew that more than 250 different species were harmed by entanglement or ingestion or both. Some other researchers, Susanna Kuhn and her colleagues, did an update of this work in 2015. Yeah. And by that time, the number had more than doubled to over 550. So 2 things are happening there, though. Yes, there's more plastic in the ocean between 1997 and 2015. But it's also true that researchers began to study this during this time. So, of course, they found more. Plastic is also a problem for the environment because it worsens the issues of invasive species. As many of you probably know, when invasive species go into a new area where their natural competition or predators are not there, it can wreak havoc on the environment. And imagine how far, a piece of driftwood could go from one island chain to another. And then imagine how much farther a piece of plastic can travel. And it's not even that scientists are necessarily worried about mammals hitchhiking from one island group to another. It can be microorganisms, bacteria, that kind of thing. But it's something that they're concerned about. And then, of course, plastic does break down. It just doesn't biodegrade. So it slowly breaks down and creates a sort of toxic soup in our waterways, bayous, or oceans. There are researchers who study the gyres, these places where plastic or debris accumulates. And what they can tell us is that the number of pieces of plastic is increasing and the size of those pieces is decreasing. So just imagine if you threw some plastic in your washing machine and let it run for 30 years. It would be breaking down slowly into smaller and smaller pieces, and that's what's happening in the gyres. And then, of course, cleaning up plastic costs money, and it's not the people who create the plastic and profit from it who pay to clean it up. It's taxpayers. It's most frequently municipal governments, and then also sort of people. Many of you have probably taken part in a cleanup in your community. So millions of volunteer hours and a lot of taxpayer dollars all around the world are used to clean up plastic debris. And then, of course, it's very closely linked to the issue of climate change. This is a photograph of an ethane cracker that went online outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania last year. It was a $6 billion project that got a $1.65 billion tax credit. And this is a place where fracked gas is turned into plastics. And I think, talking about fracking or anything like that is very complicated and complex, right? But when we were having those discussions in the Northeast about a decade ago, I really thought, okay, this is maybe what we have to do, and it's going to heat people's homes. I don't think it was sold to people as we're going to use this frack gas to produce a bunch of waste that then you're going to have to keep dealing with. So if you were in my class, if you were my students right now, I would tell you, don't freak out. Even though this is a big problem, researchers believe that this is a problem that we can solve. And they think to do so, we need to do a couple of things. We need to look at the root causes of the problem. We need to think about how this problem is different in different places around the world. And then ideally, we can consider how human behavior is involved, we can educate, and then produce policy that could solve the problem. So having read this research, I applied for funding in, what year was that? 2016, from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And really what I wanted to do with this project is to see what this big global problem looked like in Connecticut. I know that we're not on the Midway Islands. We're not one of these places in Hawaii where waste just comes in with every tide. But we wanted to investigate what it looked like in our backyard. So the idea is that I would take my political science students, so they're not field biologists, they don't have any experience with that, and we would go out in the field and we would use replicable, very simple scientific methods to collect debris, analyze it, and then report back to policymakers. Now, because this is federal funding, we're not allowed to make any specific recommendation to policymakers or speak about it in favor of any specific policy. This was at the state level. But we were allowed to share our results with them. So, in just a few hours in Connecticut, my students and I found over 1,600 pieces of debris. As you can see, it was overwhelmingly made of plastic. And when we analyzed it, we found that it wasn't from commercial or recreational fishing. It wasn't from the shipping industry or manufacturing. It was what we would call municipal waste. So it was the sort of things regular people touch all the time. It was food wrappers and plastic bottles. It was cigarette butts, which are made of plastic. The filters are made of plastic, and they are the most frequently found item in cleanups globally. It was things you would recognize: children's toys, flip-flops, that kind of thing. So based on that project, I applied for funding from the Fulbright Foundation to replicate that project in India in 2019. And I had an amazing opportunity to go and live with my family in the bottom red star, which is a town called Thiruvananthapuram. So we lived there for 6 months, and we got to investigate this problem locally. I got to work with students, and the idea behind the project was the same. We would go and collect debris, analyze it, and share the results with policymakers. So we went to a local beach, Manamkilam, right away, and did a collection of just a few hours. And we found over 6,000 pieces of debris. Just like in the United States, it was overwhelmingly made of plastic. And just like in the United States, it was what I would call municipal waste. It wasn't coming from one of those other sources like recreational fishing or commercial fishing. So while I was there, I applied for funding from the National Geographic Society. And the idea behind that project was that we would get teachers, people who worked for NGOs from around India to come down to Kerala and spend a week learning these same methods. And then ideally, they could go back to their home communities and replicate the project. So these lovely 33 folks came down to Kerala and spent a week, thanks to National Geographic, learning this project. So we did both a river collection and a beachside collection during that time. And on the river, the Karamana River, we found over 1,600 individual pieces of debris, and the story is the same. Overwhelmingly made of plastic, overwhelmingly what I would describe as municipal waste. And we went back to Manamkilam Beach just a few months after that first cleanup, and again found over 6,000 individual pieces. Same story again, mostly plastic and definitely municipal waste. So one of the great benefits of being a National Geographic Explorer is they allow you to collaborate with other explorers. And so on the message boards, a river ecologist named Hannington Ochieng from Uganda put up a message and said, does anyone want to collaborate on a project to do plastic pollution on riverways? And I had already been working with another researcher. Oh no, sorry, this is the wrong slide. I'm so sorry. This is the slide about those 33 people when they returned to their communities and they collected debris. And so you can see on the map here all of the different collection points around India. And that led to over 33,000 pieces of debris being picked up. Plastic was always the most frequently found item or type of material, but it ranged in terms of proportion from 45 to closer to 90%. So this is the slide about Hannington and Puspita. So I got this wonderful opportunity to apply for funding from National Geographic with other researchers. And so I connected with Hannington Ochieng from Uganda and Puspita Kamil from Indonesia. And we wanted to replicate this project in Uganda along the Aturukuku River, which is near Tororo, and that's where Hannington lives. So we applied for funding and we got the funding, which was very exciting. So I was in India in 2019 from January to June. Then I returned home and I started working that fall with faculty on my campus. We're coming up with courses where we could work together to teach about marine plastic pollution. And because of National Geographic, I'd made all these really neat connections. And I felt like my work is really getting some momentum. And I really think like 2020 is going to be my year, to really like take this to the next level. Well, I think you can all guess what happened next. 2020 was not my year, and it wasn't anybody's year as far as I can tell. So not only did none of that happen, I was about to go to Colombia to lead a workshop. I was about to return to India to lead a workshop. I was about to go and work with Hennington and Puspita in Uganda. None of that happened. And then my regular job, and I don't want to cause any drama here, my regular job in academia, where I led an interdisciplinary program with about 80 faculty working for me, changed drastically. We had folks who had never taught online before, being told, you've got to pivot very quickly. I had one very nice faculty member ask me if it would be okay if he could just telephone his students every week instead of getting on Blackboard. I said, no, you can't do that. Plus, would they even answer? I mean, I wonder, maybe. If he could do it, if anybody could do it, he could do it. But, it was depressing, right? It was very stressful. And I was all of a sudden not going and traveling and having any momentum around my work, but instead stuck in Zoom meetings and feeling just like nothing was working out. So I started thinking about the problem of plastic pollution. And it's very common when you read the literature, the scientific literature, which should be, neutral, non-biased, to read things like, these are the 10 dirtiest rivers in the world. These are the 10 worst polluting countries. And they are always talking about the developing world and frequently referring to places in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And I've had, a very tiny bit of experience in South Asia, but I recognize that the people who lived, around me and my family in India, they went to the grocery store and they got the same things that we get, and they use them in the same way. And I thought, it's not really, like when I throw away trash at my home that's not recyclable, I put it in a bin, right? And it gets picked up by a truck and it disappears and I never have to think about it again. But at best, those things are going to be put in a landfill, buried, or incinerated, burned up. And those have environmental consequences as well, long-term environmental consequences. So I thought, it's not that we've actually figured out that problem at all in the United States. We're just much better at hiding that problem. So I thought, how could I tell a story about what's happening with plastic pollution that connects more to my life and people like me and is not about sort of like pointing a finger at someplace far away, but recognizing how all of us contribute to this big problem, big environmental problem. And because I have this background in the arts, I know that the arts are a very powerful way to connect with people. And I think they can leave a lasting impression that, to be honest, one of my research articles is not going to necessarily leave with the public. So I thought back to that book chapter by David Laced from 1997, where he listed the 260-something different species that were harmed by plastic pollution. And I thought, well, that sounds like a lot. But within that list, there were these 46 species. And these were the ones at that time, more than 20 years ago, we already had records of both entanglement and ingestion. So I thought, there's an argument to be made, right? That they're the most susceptible or the most at risk. So I decided to make life-size portraits of those animals. And some of them are cute, little penguins and puffins. And on that list are 3 whales as well. So my method is very straightforward. I get canvas like you would paint on, but it hasn't been primed with gesso, if there are any artists in the room. And I just sketch out the animal really quickly on the canvas. And then I start sewing the kind of plastic that is often marked as if it is recyclable, You might see the chasing arrows on plastics. So you can print that on plastic knowing that there's no recycling locally or anywhere in the country for that plastic. It's sort of marketing. So I decided to use those kinds of plastics to create portraits of these animals. And so I do it by hand sewing the film plastic onto the canvas. So I'm just going to go through those and let you see what some of them look like. You can see the sizes are listed on each slide so you can get a sense of how large they are. I did bring a few of these with me today, and they're over in the corner if you want to check them out afterwards. So you can see some of them are very detailed. Obviously, the whales are not this detailed. That's that Laysan albatross, that's sort of poster species for the issue of ingestion. They're getting a little bigger here, you can see. So at this point, it's about 2021, and things were starting to open up again in Connecticut, and I thought it would make a lot of sense to work with the public on this project. And so I thought I'll take the largest pieces, think sort of like bigger sharks and whales, out to, in this case, it was the summer, so I was first approaching camps and clubs and sort of that kind of thing for kids that summer. This is at a place called the Free Center in Hartford. And so I just called these folks, said, can I bring a whale? And they said, okay. And so I started visiting different places with this first whale, the minke whale. And you can see what that looks like finished with me there for scale. It's 18 by 7 feet. That's the smallest whale in this, included in this project. And then I started taking out the sperm whale. This is my children's elementary school. It's a pajama day, I have to say that. They don't dress like this every day. It was a special day. But they allowed me to come in and lead a workshop there. And then I went to places like the University of Hartford. And in my town, there's an old Woolworths building that was empty. And they allowed me to use that for about 6 months, which was wonderful because I don't have this kind of space at home. And I just had open workshops where people could come in certain days of the week and join in and sew along. You can kind of see it taking shape here. And there's the sperm whale completed and me next to it so you can get a sense of the scale. It's 60 by 20 feet. And this is the one that's, at first it hung at the University of Hartford in front of a bank of windows, which was really neat, a very different, almost like stained glass, which I wasn't expecting, which I appreciated. And then it's been hanging at the Bradley International Airport for about 1.5 years. And then I've done a few other large ones. This is the great white shark. It's made exclusively of Amazon packaging. So, and then I started working on the bowhead whale, the other big whale from this first series. And you can see what that looks like. And there I am on the bottom right, so you can get a sense of the size. It's 52 by 22 feet. So within that first book chapter, there were 46 different species. I've finished those 46 species. And now I'm working on the species with records, the additional species with records of entanglement and ingestion from the second book chapter about the different animals that are harmed. So that's an additional 73 species. And there's no time limit, I'm just sort of slowly working through them. I think it will take, 5 years, we'll see. But I've done a few smaller whales through that. And then the orca I did with elementary school kids in Middletown, Connecticut, where I live. Each of the sort of stripes is from a different elementary school. And I just went in for day-long workshops and had any kids 2nd through 5th grade help me, which was exhausting, but super fun. So my project with Hannington and Puspita, unfortunately, we never got to go to Uganda to work on that together. But we did each work on projects in our own sort of backyard and then share the results in a collaborative paper. So we have collaborated, but we still want to continue to collaborate in different ways. And for my own work, I'm thinking a lot right now about sort of where art and science meet. I think in the sciences, we're very comfortable with using art or visual aids to sort of communicate principles. You'll often see on a grant or a call, they'll bring in an artist for like a tiny bit of the time to kind of like add some finishing touches maybe with the communication. But I'm really interested in how art might be used to collect data. And I'm not really even sure what I mean by that yet. I'm trying to explore it. I have a sabbatical next year where I hope to get to do that. But with that in mind, I applied for a project with National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. And this is a cruise company with very small ships that goes to remote places. And they're very science-oriented. There are a lot of experts on board. And National Geographic photographers are often on board these ships. So they made a call and asked people to pitch projects where they could collect data on a ship. And I pitched the idea that I would take a sketchbook and I would really just record what we were seeing, especially considering plastic pollution and climate change. And I got selected to go on a circumnavigation of Svalbard, which is north of Norway in the Arctic. And so I did like a Domestica course on watercolors, if you guys know what that is. I'd never done watercolors really before. And I just created this sketchbook of, I think, about 67 different pieces. So I'll go through those quickly and you can see them. And the idea was like I was recording what we were seeing and also taking notes, trying to talk to people with a lot more experience in the Arctic to hear how they felt the landscape had changed. It's interesting, these ships do go into very remote places. And so you're kind of bringing, obviously like they're following maritime law. They're not dumping waste. But at one point, a very nice lady leaned over the ship and her sunglasses fell off. And then we watched a polar bear get those and play with them for about an hour. I mean, it was like a directly becoming like plastic pollution. You can't go get anything back from a polar bear. So Svalbard is a place where there are more polar bears than people. But so very few people. And yet we would go to a beach, a remote area where no one lived for hundreds of miles around, and we would find plastic on every shoreline we visited. And that's just because of the way currents deliver, waves and currents deliver debris around the world. So I'll show you. Yeah, there were so many polar bears. It was crazy. By about day 5, we were like, oh, another polar bear, which is a very weird place to find yourself in. But we could see them. We saw a cub playing near a place where there was some plastic sort of synthetic rope. So there's definitely interactions with plastic pollution throughout the trip. But it was a wonderful, phenomenal opportunity. I would never have had a chance to go and see this kind of place in other circumstances. We were able to do a circumnavigation of Svalbard at that time of the year, which was unusual at that time of the year because of global climate change. I'm one of those cold people. And the Global Seed Bank is there as well, which was really fascinating. We got to visit that from the outside. You're not allowed to go inside, or I wasn't. So I'm just trying to figure out like how this might be a kind of data and might be used comparatively to understand how this region has changed. And there's a really cool website called watercolorworld.org where you can look at watercolors that were produced by explorers or people on ships for all different kinds of reasons in the 1700s and 1800s. And so you can go use a map and just hone in on those places and see what other people produced in those same areas. So these are watercolors from that website. And I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of similarities between the kind of things we were seeing, of course. But I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to use that to as sort of like a data point. I'm still trying to figure that out. So I want to end on a note that makes you feel hopeful about your role in addressing this problem. I do think it's something that we all can try to help. I don't know, I don't want to use the word fix, but we can all do better. I encourage people to use fewer single-use plastics, particularly, but also to not beat yourself up. It's very difficult in our world to not use single-use plastics or any kind of plastic packaging. I don't know how people do it unless they have unlimited time, unlimited money, or both. I take a canvas bag to the grocery store and everything in there is wrapped in plastic. I tried to walk through, I did a video in a Rite Aid a few years ago, and almost everything on every shelf was made of plastic or wrapped in plastic. The exceptions were some of the books and some of the greeting cards. Many greeting cards are now individually wrapped in plastic now. And so I'm seeing trends where things that used to not be wrapped in plastic, like dog food or kitty litter, are now it's the default. It has become the default. So I don't want you to beat yourself up about it, but I do think we can all do better. I also, because I teach in a political science department, of course, I think that communicating with our leaders at every level is really important. We tend to focus on national politics, but we have a much higher chance of having our voices heard at state and local levels. And I think that's really important for our democracy. I also try to celebrate companies that are doing better and use them whenever possible. Because in our society, right, in our capitalist society, sometimes you can accomplish more, through economic choices than maybe some political choices. And there's something called the Marine Debris Tracker app. There's another one called the Clean Swell app. Anyone can download those and use them. And basically, you could be walking at a bayou nearby or in a park, and it allows you to geotag basically everything that you pick up. So you don't necessarily have to be at the beach or on a riverside to provide scientists with fantastic data about the way waste moves through our world. The Marine Debris Tracker app was created by another National Geographic Explorer named Jenna Jambeck. And then, of course, you can sew with me. That's one way you can do it today. We will be working on the 80-foot fin whale. This is sort of like the schematic I make to try to figure out the proportions, right? Because if you're working with something that big, you can't just eyeball it. And we're basically, those two panels that are in the back of the room together make up one of these small rectangles that will be a part of the final product. And I don't know how long it will take to do this. I never know. At least a year. Throughout this year, I'll be working on it. But I would love it if you want to hang around and sew at the end of this event. I have all the materials, the plastic and everything, and everyone who works on it gets to sign the back. So there's this really nice record of sort of everyone who's contributed to the project over time. And these are some of the groups that have supported my work in the past. And I want to give a special thank you to Natasha Poggio, who was my colleague at the University of Hartford many moons ago and has been a great collaborator over the years. So thank you.
All right. Yes, we're going to switch over into our conversation. So I know Professor Poggio she's right there. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Owens. If that doesn't give us a conscience about doing better for the earth, I don't know what will. Just amazing photography and amazing art. So again, thank you so much. So I'm going to introduce our moderator really quick, and if I can ask you all to come and jump up on stage while I do this. So Professor Natasha Poggio, I was calling you Natasha, I'm very sorry, is an associate professor of visual communication design here at the University of Houston downtown, a Fulbright scholar, TEDx speaker, and passionate social impact advocate. She brings global experience to her work as a design educator. Natasha's teaching centers on visual communication while her research explores the intersection of sustainable development, global health, and social justice. Her work focuses on designing planet-centered solutions that raise awareness and drive change on critical global issues. She holds an MFA in design from the University of Texas at Austin. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for today, Natasha Poggio.
Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful talk, wasn't it? Yes, you get like nods. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to use an expression that I saw you had. I'm thrilled to the gills to have you here. So as Dr. Owens mentioned, we were colleagues 17, 18 years ago. We started together at the University of Hartford. So I have followed her work, and we work together. We actually took students overseas. We have projects in India and Kenya. So you cannot imagine how excited I am that you all get to see her amazing work and learn from her. And then that I get a chance to also ask questions. We're going to have a microphone that is being placed right there. Perfect. So if anyone has questions, I have like some prepared, but if anyone has questions, please stand next to the microphone and I'll switch to you. First of all, I'm really thankful that you were able to come and share your knowledge and brought also this opportunity to do a hands-on workshop later after we finish. So it's pretty cool because we get to experience what every other person that has contributed to your projects, because it's not like it's a collective, right? So everyone has participated, so we get a chance to do that. So I have some questions, and one is like, how has your interdisciplinary background shaped your perspective and strategies in environmental advocacy and education? You mentioned a little bit, but if you could point a few examples.
Yes. Yeah. I think, obviously the art background really kicked in for this project and has allowed me to broaden the impact of my work, which was really important to me. I can say that as an academic, I didn't start out as a new professor trying to incorporate art into my work. I was actively discouraged from doing that by people on my campus. I think people get afraid of young scholars, that they're going to lose track, or I don't know what that was their baggage, not mine. But once I got tenure, I just started incorporating the arts into my work in any way that I could, because I do think it's such an important way to share information with a broader audience. And like I said, it's interesting. I turned 50 this year. I can find articles from the literature from the year I was born that say things like, oh man, if we don't do something about this, it's going to be a pretty big deal. And it's frustrating because the people who are reading those articles over that 50-year period are people who pretty much already know about the problem. And so I think it's really important for us as researchers to push beyond that and to try to communicate with a much broader audience than just other experts in the field.
Yeah, and yesterday was Earth Day. So it's started in 1970, so technically we are 55 years now of Earth Day, and these problems happen and people congregated to celebrate and to advocate for Earth Day 55 years ago. So the problems were there, plastics and all these things. So I'm glad that you had the opportunity to pivot your research. Obviously, you have the environmental policy, but you pivot into art because that aligns with communicating complex issues to people.
Absolutely.
So what was your inspiration to merge this science, policy, and art in plastic pollution? Because you specifically chose marine debris. You know, pollution is everywhere. So why was there anything in contact with the ocean? What was call you to do the research on that paper?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the experience in India allowed me to see what it looked like sort of on the front lines in some places. There is a lot of debris in those communities, and they do not have typical, what we would consider typical waste infrastructure. So it's sort of like they're fighting a losing battle. But I had been experimenting with trying to do something with the plastic that I saved. So I saw the chasing arrows on plastic, that we had in our household. I have 3 children. And I kept trying to figure out where to recycle it. And, this is like literally my job, right? My field. And I could not figure out where to recycle it. Sometimes there's a website listed, but you go to the website and it's like you can take some things to some, big box stores, like dry cleaning bags, such a random sort of assemblage. And it didn't seem to make sense in terms of the types of plastics that we were seeing in our household. So I started collecting plastic, and it wasn't like a hoarding situation with like towers of debris all over my household. It really does, like, you can squish it into boxes. And I was just trying to figure out where to recycle it. And I did that for a couple of years. And I couldn't figure out where to recycle it. So I was trying to see if I could use it for art and sort of experimenting with different things. Sewing it, I tried to glue it, which does not work. I tried to sew it, and I was making things, but they really weren't any kind of like cohesive message about the issue. So that was happening in like 2012. And then we went to India, and I had that experience and came back. And then when COVID hit, I just needed something to do with my hands while I was stuck in Zoom meetings. And so I just thought, I'm going to try it. And I'm just going to say I'm going to do this. Like, I didn't know if I could actually make a 60-foot whale out of plastic, but I thought, like, I'm just going to say I'm going to do it and then try to do it. The first time we hung the big whale, I thought, is this going to work or what? And thankfully it did. It was reinforced, in several ways. But I think being able to find that list by David Laced and to connect it with animals, right? People care about animals. And sometimes they care what happens to animals more than they care what happens to other people, right? And so as soon as I started experimenting with the animal portraits, it just immediately they were satisfying to me as an artist. And so I just kept doing them. And then people seemed to like it. And so it sort of like built from there.
Yeah, I remember I've seen the images when she started experimenting during the pandemic, and there was the one with the puffin. I love the puffin. And she created even a kit that you could get in Etsy, I think, right?
A what? A kit.
The kit.
Yes, a little kit.
Yeah, that you could order and then have your own.
You can sew your own, yeah.
So there's a lot of creativity in how you came up with ways to incorporate art and science. And I think that sometimes it's like what you said, right? Like artists or designers like me get invited to contribute and beautify something, but they are not part of the process. You understand the artistic process and you incorporate in your research, which is amazing. And I think it's part of that interdisciplinary background that you have. So you mentioned how hard it is to recycle things. I struggle. I also collect a lot of stuff. And because of her, I have a lot of plastic and, plastic wrappers and everything. And I have like tubs that I've been packing up. So what are some of the common misconceptions the public has about plastic in the ocean? And which marine species are the most vulnerable now, right, after at least to entanglement or an ingestion?
Yeah, I mean, we're still collecting data about different species that are subjected to entanglement or ingestion. And it's moved beyond sort of, it started out as being called marine debris, and now people are more frequently referring to it just as sort of like as plastic pollution more generally, because it's not just in the oceans, it's on land and in riverways and everywhere. So I've seen articles, well, in India, for example, cows are ingesting plastic that they come into contact with. And in fact, actually in America, I found an article it's called American Beef Magazine, and it's for cattle ranchers, and it's about what they call plastic disease. And it's related to something that they just call hardware disease, I think. And it basically means a ruminant is walking along and grazing, and then they eat something that's in their way. And they've known about it for a while with sort of metal and things like that, but it's now they're finding it with all the plastic that's used in agriculture, that they're ingesting agriculture. I've seen studies about elephants ingesting plastic, and studies coming out of South America where a researcher who does a lot of work on rivers has recorded different herps. So amphibians and reptiles that are engaging with plastic debris. So it's really much broader than just ocean species, but those are the ones we kind of know more about right now. And I didn't do the first part of your question. What was the first part of your question?
It was about
the biggest
common
misconceptions,
right? Like, because you mentioned it, how plastic breaks down. Sometimes when we talk about those gyres, people think that the plastic is floating in the surface, like a plastic bottle, but that's not the case.
No, it's getting smaller and smaller. And I think there also have been some projects that have been really well publicized, like the ocean cleanup. This young man from the Netherlands who had a viral TED Talk and then has gotten a lot of funding to go and clean up the gyres. And it's, I think what worries me about something like that, right, is that people will think, oh, someone's dealing with that already. Like, that's problem solved. Let's check that problem off the list. And what they found is that a lot of their early forays into going and picking up the waste from the gyres have not been successful. They have had a lot more success in putting barriers on rivers where they can collect debris before it gets out into the ocean. But yeah, part of me worries that people will see a TikTok or a Facebook reel or whatever and say like, oh, great, someone's already dealt with that problem. We can just check it off the list and I don't have to worry about it anymore because someone's out in the ocean collecting that.
I got to actually meet him last year and have a picture with him, showing a picture of my student work creating something about plastic pollution. So
cool.
Yes, it was pretty cool in Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what you said, like the ocean cleanup, they started in the ocean, as the name indicates, but then they move into the deltas of rivers.
Yeah.
And I know from their work in South America, they are like trying to stop the plastic from going from the rivers, you know, from all the contamination that happens from landfills, flying away and stuff, to the ocean.
Yes.
So they realized that, we could keep on collecting plastic and microplastics at this point from the ocean, but we need to stop at the source. And obviously to stop at the source, it's actually to stop our consumption of plastic and, you know, the industry by reducing the demand of plastic. So what kind of policy changes will make the biggest difference in reducing plastic waste on a global scale?
That's a great question. I mean, if I had my druthers, I really just wish we could have a conversation about what are the important uses of even single-use plastics. You know, like there are definitely very important medical reasons to use single-use plastics on occasion. But right now, it's just sort of everything and mostly based around convenience, not necessarily need. There are single-use plastics that we might not need here, but that in other countries are really important for food storage and other things like that. So I wish that people would kind of have a serious discussion about where we need this material and where it's sort of an excess.
If we need it, in the first place, right? Do we need it in the first place?
I mean, I think we do need some, even single-use plastics. I mean, I wouldn't want to imagine like a neonatal ward in a hospital without the benefit of single-use plastics. But for a while there, with COVID, with the masks, every parking lot I went to and got in and out of for about a year and a half, I would see multiple masks every single time. You know, those were really being thrown away on the ground a lot, you know. So that's an important medical use, but then we're not disposing of it properly. What a lot of people who study plastic pollution talk about is sort of this analogy that if you walked into your bathroom and your tub was overflowing, what would you do first? Would you get some towels and try to mop up the water on the floor, or would you try to turn off the tap and stop it and then try to clean it up? And, you know, the logical answer is that we would want to turn off the tap. And that's just not even part of the discussion right now. And like I showed you with that graph at the very beginning, it is the stated goal of the plastics industry to increase the amount of plastics they produce every year. So they're not even trying to reduce it right now, and we need to, drastically.
I remind you all that there's a microphone, so please approach it and ask questions. I can keep going for a few more minutes, but I would love to hear some of your questions. So I'm familiar with your ocean voyages, jealous, but as someone who has explored the polar latitudes myself, both extremes of the planet, I know how powerful those experiences can be. They are transformative. Didn't get to see polar bears yet, but I saw a lot of penguins. Could you share more about that collaboration with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic for anyone that wants to apply for a National Geographic storytelling grant, and how you've integrated that art and science in the journey? Especially, what kind of impact do you hope these experiences have on the participants?
Yes. So I might have to ask you to remind me about two of those questions in just a sec. That was a lot in one. It was an incredible experience. And that particular grant, they opened it up to explorers, and you could pitch any project to collect data. My project was easy for them in a sense because I wasn't actually going and collecting any materials in other countries or jurisdictions. So it was sort of like an easy option for them. And I have applied to go to Antarctica next year. I don't know if I'll be selected or not. But during that trip, we were sewing. We actually sewed a portrait of a polar bear, and I gave a research presentation. And so that's sort of the way I was trying to engage with the participants that were a part of the expedition. But, you know, of course, it's also, it's a very expensive sort of cruise. I would never have been able to go in any other circumstances, but it's very expensive, and it's an experience, you know, that most people won't get to have, right? Because it is literally taking a small ship into a very remote place. And so I had very mixed emotions while I participated in that, because especially with the example of the sunglasses, I mean, we brought that waste to that bear. You know, it was a direct line. And, you know, you kind of hope that the people who are participating take a lot from it and take it back to their regular lives and try to do better. But there's no guarantee at all, you know, of that kind of thing. Certainly it was an audience that was very interested in the environment and very pro-environmental. But in terms of National Geographic grants, I would encourage anyone to check out their grant program. They have grants at every level, and if you are awarded a grant from the National Geographic Society, you become an explorer, which I didn't even realize when I applied. One of the areas they fund is plastic pollution, and I got this small grant, and then they send you like a welcome video, and it says, "You're a National Geographic Explorer," and I was like, "Am I? I didn't know that." And then, of course, I put it in my signature on everything I could. But they're very interested in people telling stories, and they want people to do, to connect with nature and to live a more environmental life. And the ocean is one of their sort of key areas. So if anyone is interested in checking that out, I really encourage you to do so. And they have kind of student level grants and then for older researchers. So I think it's a really fantastic network that's very supportive of researchers.
Yeah, and the title is pretty cool. So now you have two really cool titles, a Fulbright Nehru Fellow and a National Geographic Explorer. I see there's someone for a question. Could you state your name and ask your question?
Hi, so I'm Yasmina Mora. I'm a senior philosophy student, and I also take environmental ethics with Professor Ring. Shout out Professor Ring. I watched National Geographic's Ocean Explorers a few months ago, and they talk about the polar bear situation where they actually adapt now to land and eating different animals. So I was wondering on your thoughts about how plastic is also incorporated in that adaptation, because you mentioned the cattle eating plastic and consuming that, and I was wondering your thoughts of if that's visible to what you're seeing now.
Yeah, and I haven't checked out sort of what researchers who study polar bears have found on that recently. We didn't see any polar bears actually eating plastic. We saw them interacting with it for sure. But I do know that in the United States, other bears definitely. In Connecticut, we have a lot of bears in communities that are going through garbage and have figured out that that's a great place for them to get food. And so I'm certain that they're ingesting plastic on a regular basis. I'm not sure if that's the case for polar bears. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question because they need a lot of protein and to sustain, it's a very harsh condition in the Arctic, the temperatures. So they eat the seals and they need that blubber. And obviously plastic is not going to do that for them. In my experience, when I visited Antarctica, I found plastic in the landing sites and it was really heartbreaking. And I think it was like accidental. It wasn't like purposely. I don't think it was like the currents, although the Drake Passage has a very intense currents, the Southern Ocean. But I think that it was like an accident that someone, maybe they have a wrapper from taking the nausea medication on the ship and then they accidentally drop it. Or I remember it was like sore throat candy wrappers. So when I saw that, I told everyone, it's like, please start looking for any trash and let's bring it back. And I kept thinking of your work because we don't realize that plastic is everywhere, right? It's in our hearts now, in our bodies, in our brain, in human placenta. So it's very worrisome, and that's why we need to kind of like do something about it. Is there any other question? Yes, do you mind coming to the microphone?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work. I am really inspired by this interdisciplinary approach, and I wanted to hear a little bit more. I know this is slightly unfair because you said you were about to work on this and are getting ready to work on this. How you are perceiving or thinking about the ways in which art can be incorporated as a fundamental component of science or as even data for science, as a method as well. Because I think that idea of communicating really difficult topics with the public, art has a very special reach that other disciplines don't necessarily have, or other methods don't necessarily have.
Yeah, and it is sort of burgeoning, right? So for me, I'm just beginning to explore it, and I hope to do a lot more of that over the next year. With the watercolors of the Arctic, I'm hoping I can do something with comparing them, though it's not that I went to the exact same, spot. And so we can't really say this mountain has changed or the snowfall on this mountain is different in this way. But we can say that the sketchbook that I created and the notes I took are a record of that moment in time. From a certain perspective. And so that's kind of the way I'm thinking of it, almost like an anthropologist or a biologist's field notebook, right? Where it's a combination of what you're seeing and what you think about what you're seeing. And I think artists and scientists have that quality of being keen observers, which is really important. And so I hope that, the goal, right, is that by incorporating art into it, I'm picking up on something that wouldn't be seen in the same way or might complement other work. I mean, of course, we have ice core data from the Arctic that can tell us so much about climate change in that region, but I'm trying to find out if I can find any journals that seafarers might have kept, those from those watercolors. I've sort of made like a spreadsheet, and started to kind of explore who might have the collections of those watercolors and see if I can find out if they wrote anything as well, because that might be interesting. Yeah. So
Well,
that's what I'm
thank you.
thinking. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Zambrano, but I wanted to remind you that this is a President's Lecture Series on sustainability. So we are celebrating Earth Week or Earth Month, but Earth Day is every day.
Yes.
That's why we are creating consciousness about how we dispose of our trash, how we consume less, and how we reduce our consumption. So keep that in mind as you go back to your classrooms and your homes. Jay?
All right, folks. So let's give these folks a round of applause. Thank you so much. So again, thank you for everyone that has joined us today for this installment of our President's Lecture Series. Again, Dr. Owens, we thank you so much for your presentation today, and we wish you safe travels back, and wherever you go around the world, continue spreading the great word. This concludes our installment of the University of Houston Downtown President's Lecture Series. There's still food out there, folks, so please enjoy some of that, and also we've got the workshop right after this lecture. So again, thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful day.